Oshri Sileskyte, did I pronounce your name right? Yes. From the University of Vasa, and she's the researcher of management, and now she's going to talk to you about something about. You know what the strategy your company has? Probably you don't.
Well, that's why exactly this research is about.
That is why Osrin is going to tell you about how to engage employees in implementing your firm's strategy. And you're welcome, Osrin.
Thank you, Rika. Thank you for wonderful work when putting this whole wonderful event together. I'm sure it's a lot of interesting topics happening and really wonderful to be here. So, good evening, afternoon, everyone. And as Rika said, my name is Oshine, and I'm really focusing on strategy implementation and specifically how to translate the strategy into something that people would understand, that they would be interested to act upon. Because we know very well that, Vasa region companies are trying to be energy leaders, they're trying to be technology leaders, and many times once we design beautiful strategies, we need to get it out there and get these thousands of employees, thousands of managers working and implementing hard the wonderful plans that we have. So I was thinking to ask you, these are the typical aspects that when we talk about strategy implementation, we sort of think that strategy execution is about targets, it's about key performance indicators, it's about, sort of performance-driven culture and all this sort of communication and all the processes and structures that we normally have. And what do you think, what is missing? Any ideas? No, not that much. What is missing is people, right? So more and more companies realize that strategy execution is so much less about the structures, although they're very, very important, that we would have certain systems and processes in mind, but very much it is about the people who are going to get these sort of ideas out there, working on them and making them happen, right? So let's say 95% of the strategy execution is actually about people, and that's why we have this presentation today looking at, what to do that people would be interested to act upon the plans that we design in the company. Because what happens when we forget the people and focus only about the systems and about sort of the processes that are in the organization, actually is this, right? So strategy is somewhere there, cramped, and everyone is too busy doing their daily stuff and busy with everything else except the strategy, right? So what I did, I actually tried to answer this question by understanding what makes people in different places of the world be interested in executing firm strategy. So I worked with one multinational corporation and sort of I traced how the strategy is traveling from the top to the very down of the organization, right? So I looked at, what top management is doing, how they're what they're talking about a strategy, what kind of processes they're building in place to translate the strategy, how middle managers are receiving the strategy, what they follow, what they don't, how they interpret what the top management is doing, what project leaders, those who are leading the actual teams who are working on the different kind of strategic and operational projects, what they're thinking about this whole thing. Do they even know what has been planned and what has been sort of happening in terms of the strategy work in the organizations? And finally, what the employees who are supposed to work on the strategies every day, do they know anything? And if they do, what actually they do about it, right? So I did the same exercise in 3 units of the multinational corporation in Finland, in Russia, and in India. And this is what I found. Actually, what I found is written here in 300 pages, and you are welcome to pick your free copy out there. So I'm going to present very, very small fraction of the core ideas that sort of came up in the research, and just the main message which I really want you to leave with and think about when implementing the strategy. So if we look at Finland, and what not only managers but also the employees, the key employees who are otherwise leading the international teams, who are working on the international strategies, they all kept saying one and the same thing. It's nice, we know that there's strategic work happening in the organization, but then if we think about, the strategy work as such, we don't understand that language. Is something too fancy? Is something too hard to relate to? And if I would think of how to translate my how to translate these strategies into my daily work, I really have a challenge to do that. And these are the people who are otherwise regarded as brilliant employees by top management. They know, they know that they're working together with the top managers on certain strategic projects. So these are not a basic person in a very, very simple function. These, if these people don't know what your strategy is about, probably you are in trouble, right? So they really found it difficult to relay the strategic messages to their work. Very similar happened in India. And actually in India was even more confusing because first of all, they didn't even consider having one strategy. They said, we have thousands of strategies that we're working on. Of course, it all relates to one big strategy, and this is sort of something holistic that we're working on. But basically, we have many, many different strategies. And what I need to know is that there are leaders who are sort of translating these strategies. And also what I need to know that, yes, I need to respect the strategy. So strategy is like a god for us. We need to respect it. We need to take it up. But basically, well, we more look at how managers deal with the people. So, and management philosophy was, we think about the people rather than the strategy, and that's how we get things done. So the whole conversation was very much about fulfilling my needs as an employee, and then I would like to hear about what company is talking about, right? If we look what happened in Russia, when we sort of trace the story from the top to the bottom, it's very similar thing. So the employees are saying, it's nice. I know that managers are working with the strategies. That's okay. But then, I rely on them, so I know that they'll do their job, and I'm here just doing my job. So what I need to know only that the manager would translate for me, what I need to do in order to fulfill his targets. So I want to do my job good because I know that if I'm doing my job well, I'm going to get a salary and company will do well. However, I'm not that bothered about sort of, what's happening at the top. And that's a problem because managers are investing, if we go through, Finnish, through the Indian, through the Russian organizations, and that's just a couple of examples that sort of I looked at, employees and middle managers and project leaders, they're saying one and the same thing. I don't understand what managers are doing. And if you look at what's happening in Vasa region, right, we have many companies where employees are not management professionals. They're engineers, they're sort of having technical education, and sort of the managerial language that their managers talk is not familiar to them, even if they have some sort of management background or in a managerial role. So, by this time, the companies and the managers are freaked out, right? I am in trouble because when you do the survey and you ask your employees, sort of, do you know the strategy? They normally say, no, I don't know the strategy. And it appeared the reason for this is many employees who work in expert organizations, they feel that they can say that I know the strategy only when I know it as an expert. So they're, for example, engineers, and if I'm not, very deeply knowing the strategy, I will never tell you that I know the strategy, right? So, for example, organizations that I've been researching sort of had the same problem. They issued a survey, and they figured out, and they were like freaking out that, we don't, our people don't know the strategy. What I found when I went and actually looked at what they're doing, when we sort of observed what actually they're doing, how they're behaving, what things they're performing, what things they're not, it appears that they all say that we don't know the strategy, but they actually behave strategically. So in their daily work, they actually were doing things that organization would like them to do, even if they were saying in the surveys and maybe in sort of interviews that, well, I'm not very good at strategy, right? So one message to take out of this presentation is very important to not fall in the trap when someone is saying, I don't know the strategy, that means that organization is in trouble. It might not be the case, particularly in the expert organizations. However, if someone says, I don't know the strategy, we still should not 100% rely that they're going to do the job, right? So what to do to make people behave strategically, right? Because this is our target, this is what we want. We want to get their our strategies enacted and our goals ready. So the key thing what appeared is that these systems and the processes that organizations are building are absolutely necessary to get information about what strategy is about and what people are supposed to be doing. However, they are not effective unless certain conditions are fulfilled. So normally, if we look at the management practices on the organizations, these systems and processes are used to say, this is our strategy, do it. These are the goals, do them, right? And you saw what happens from the comments that even the star employees are saying, I don't relate to that language, how do I do that? Right? I do something, and if it turns out to be good, that's fine, but that doesn't help me, right? So the goals and the systems and the performance indicators are very, very important. But these systems have to be used in such a way that the managers would use this system to translate how these systems and goals that organization has actually helps to achieve personal goals. Now let me give you a couple of examples. So one great example is about corporate language. We all know that in Finland, increasingly, there's more and more international business and corporations are turning to have their corporate language as English. And when you're going to the organizations, many people still are not willing to speak English. And we bump into ridiculous attempts to make them implement the corporate language policy by having things hanged on the door saying, we don't speak any other language than English there, and everyone still shuts down and speaks Finnish, and stuff like that, right? So what did an Indian unit actually, when implementing the corporate language English policy, and they achieved it very, very well. They didn't say, we speak English here, although we have another 30 languages in the unit. What they did, they used the system for performance appraisals and the performance evaluation to say, hey guys, I know you want to make an international career. Is this your goal, your personal aspiration? Yes, of course, that's why I came to work in a multinational corporation. So I have good news for you, because we are here having the corporate language policy English, and I would like you to help you to develop your English skills. Right? So what he said, instead of he was saying, the person who was saying that, we have the language policy here, follow the policy, they were saying, I want to know what your personal needs are, and I want you to help achieve your personal career goals. And in the end, people started listening and started understanding that, okay, the organization is actually working for me, but the managers got the alignment of the personal goals with the organizational goals. Now you may say that, it's not always possible. For example, how do you implement something which relates to cutting costs, which always affect the employees? So I give you another example, which is also a live example that happened to be observed in the research. So the Indian unit had very strong pressure from the Finnish headquarters to cut the costs at the unit level, right? And the managers of the unit already knew that the people are overworking, that costs are already at a very, very thin line, right? How do you get to do that? So instead of communicating that now we have to implement the cutting cost policy, what they did was they searched for how to achieve the cut of the very basic costs. So they calculated that if they let's say switch off AC system, air conditioning system at the office for example, evening hours and the night, even if several employees would be in the office, right, they would still manage to save quite a lot of costs, the basic costs. So what they did, instead of saying, we are now switching off the AC, and even if you're in the office, keep sweating there, we don't bother, they said vice versa. So they used corporate communication system to say, hey guys, we know how overworked you are. We know how you want to spend more time with your families. We are now launching an incentive system for you. Why don't you go home after 7 p.m. and in order to incentivize you, we switch off the AC so that you would have motivation to get out of the office. Okay. So they have achieved the same what they needed to do, but they communicated that, and and they use the corporate communication system to really address the very, very sensitive need of the personnel working there, right? And actually, when I went to the unit and discussed with the people, they were saying, oh, you know, our top managers are caring for us so much. And they were telling the story about this incentivizing and letting them go home after 7 p.m., you know, and this AC thing, like an organizational myth almost, right? And I figured out what's actually the purpose of it only when I went and talked with the top executive and said, well, actually, yeah, that was nice, but this is what we've done, right? So the people sort of behaved according, and they, of course, they gave extra effort. So they would work from home, they would give extra hours, even because they felt that managers are caring about them so much, right? And the third example, which is just very, very basic, right? We don't always have to go to something very personal. We don't always have to go to some very, very specific needs of individual. We all have career goals. So even something like, you know, we want to be a great engineering company. We want to be, you know, a company that produces great engines or something like that. An employee who is working there might very well have the same goal. I want to be a great engineer. So why not to say, you know, we know that you want to be a great engineer. Why don't we do something about you being a great engineer or great production manager or great manager in general, right? So why don't we do this and we help you achieve that, right? So of course, what we have to understand that these sort of stories, they shouldn't be only the stories, that there should be a culture and there should be the actual support of the sort of people who are there. But once the people are feeling that their personal needs and aspirations are addressed, then they start themselves searching for what I can do for the company, right? What can I do to get this company successful? Because if this company is successful, I'm going to work there and I'm going to be cared of, right? So this is very important because when we understand people, and of course there's a lot of text, but the idea is that strategies are out there, and normally people will never listen to what we're trying to say and what we're trying to communicate because they all have sort of their own needs and their own goals. But if we understand these people, if we try to listen, and if we're trying to align goals through these systems that we have in place, this is how it happens to sort of get our strategies implemented. So all I want you to leave with, and maybe I know that those who are, especially in engineering sector, they always say we don't like to sell anything, we're just doing good products, right? And that's sort of, especially for the Finnish companies, this is a very common thing. But what I want you to think about, we are selling our products to customers, and we're doing that on the basis of addressing customer needs. Okay, we don't question these assumptions. That's sort of taken for granted. You know, in order to sell something, we need to address the needs, we need to search what they need of. Why don't we think about our employees as a customer? Because if we want to buy in, to get their buy-in of the strategy, you know, this is exactly what we need to think about. We need to think about people's needs and how can we, with what we do, address those needs. And if we get this sort of, you know, if we get this alignment happening, we can really get the wonderful strategies that are out there implemented and executed and achieved, and really companies thriving. So one more time, feel free to pick a free copy of the book. It's quite complex though. It's kind of was a bit simplified here, but I hope you can still relate. And there are a lot of extracts from the people in the field, so there are a lot of stories there as well that you can read. And I'm very happy to have organizations supporting this research. A really big thanks to Vasa University and the graduate school, and of course Marcus Wallenberg Foundation, who really funded the whole data collection in 3 countries and sort of helped to get this rich data out there. And I'm very happy to take your questions and comments about the presentation. So thank you very much. Yes, please.
Do you have any sort of structured model of how to implement these strategic, for one thing, the main drivers, which are competitiveness to get revenues and then profitability to keep the company going and the shareholders happy, and then the about 50 tools, production economical tools which can be used. Do you have any model or strategy, or is it shown in this book?
It's shown in the book, and exactly what the book is saying is that to have what you are saying is very important, but you need to carry this to the people.
Sorry.
So you need to carry this to the people. So
Oh,
you
yes.
need to verbally and qualitatively, without a model, to work with every person and every manager in their team. They have to know their people and sort of to carry these processes to their people, including the board, including the top managers, right? So, because top managers are also having their needs. And if their needs are not addressed, this is not gonna work, because
Do you see is there a problem to get this education implemented all
Absolutely.
through the organization?
absolutely.
I have been working with Evgenia Wärtsilä in the beginning of their strategic planning, and in the beginning of 80s, Wärtsilä bought a book, Strategic Thinking, and then they started to do this work from inside.
Mm-hmm.
ABB had to have a helper from Sweden to get this job done, but they are very efficient and good and competitive and profitable, this company.
Indeed. Systems can differ, but it's what we do with the systems.
Yeah.
So that's what the message is here about. So the systems can be same or different, but how do we link the systems with those who are using the systems? That's the important thing.